During family dinner, my sister-in-law stood up, pointed at me, and said, "You're a cheater." Then she turned to my 7-year-old daughter and added, "You're not really ours. Robert isn't your dad." My husband didn't panic. He did this. 5 minutes later, they regretted everything. If motherhood gives you anything, it's radar. Not the fun kind that helps you find lost toys. The animal kind. The something in this room is wrong sense. That feeling hit me the moment my husband, Robert, and I walked into his parents' dining room that night. His mother, Ruth, gave me a tight smile. His father, Gerald, gave me no smile at all. And his younger sister, Jenna, sat there with the look of a cat who had eaten something it shouldn't and couldn't wait to brag about it. Our daughter, Mia, 7 years old and sweet enough to break your heart, slipped into the seat beside me. She swung her legs and hummed under her breath, oblivious to the storm gathering around her. The room was too quiet. Too ready. We made it through salad. Barely. Then Ruth cleared her throat. The kind of throat clear that means someone is about to drop a bomb disguised as family conversation. "Jenna," she said, "you wanted to share something with us?" Share. My stomach dropped. Jenna pushed her chair back and stood up slowly, dramatically, because of course she did. She pointed at me like a prosecutor in a courtroom she built in her head. "You," she announced, voice trembling with excitement, "are a cheater." I blinked. I honestly thought maybe she meant at board games, or that weird family diet challenge I keep refusing to join. But no, she meant actual cheating. Before I could process that level of delusion, Jenna turned to my daughter, to Mia, and said, "You're not really ours. Robert isn't your dad." The world dropped out from under us. Mia froze. Her little face drained of color. She looked at Robert, then at me, then back at Robert. "Daddy?" she whispered, barely audible. What does she mean?" My heart cracked so violently I swear I heard it. And then, because apparently cruelty is a group sport, Gerald added, flat and cold, "Sweetie, we're not really your grandparents." I felt Mia flinch like she'd been slapped. I reached for her immediately, pulled her out of her chair, held her against my chest. I didn't shout, didn't argue, didn't give them a show. I stood up, took her hand, and walked her toward the hallway. Behind me, I heard Jenna drop something on the table with a triumphant smack. As we turned, my eyes caught a glimpse of an envelope on the table. Thick, official-looking, the kind that comes from clinics or labs. I didn't stop or touch it, but I saw the way Robert's expression tightened when he looked at it, like he already knew exactly what it was and exactly what it meant. I kept walking, but my ears strained for Robert's voice. Inside the dining room, the shouting started. "Ruth, we did you a favor." Jenna, "It's a paternity test. Open it." Gerald, "Go on, see for yourself. She played you for a fool." Mia trembled in my arms, and then Robert's voice, calm, controlled, dangerously steady. "This," he said, "is the last time we will ever visit you." Silence. Sharp, shocked silence. Ruth sputtered, "What? What do you mean? You should be angry at her, not us." Jenna screeched, "We told you the truth." Robert didn't raise his voice, but every word hit like steel. "I can't believe you did a DNA test behind my back." A beat. "I can't believe you said this in front of a child." Another beat. "You're right about one thing." I held my breath. "You're not her grandparents anymore." Someone gasped. "And I'm not your son anymore." Chairs scraped. Someone cursed. Someone tried to talk over him. And then Robert said the line that turned the whole night inside out. "Yes, I know she isn't biologically mine." The room went dead still. "I have always known." I closed my eyes, holding Mia tighter. And my wife never cheated on me. More silence. Stunned, choking silence. The kind his family had never experienced in their lives. Then Robert's footsteps approached, slow and heavy. He appeared in the hallway, eyes on our daughter first, then on me. "Let's go," he said quietly. We left without another word. No dramatic exit. No anger. Just a clean, permanent cut. As we walked into the cold night air, Mia clinging to me, Robert's hand on my back, I felt the ground shift under us. Like the universe had finally snapped a tension wire that had been tightening for years. What happened that night didn't start at that dinner table. Not even close. To understand how we got here, you have to know what happened long before this night. If you'd told me years ago that my in-laws would someday accuse me of cheating using a secret DNA test, I wouldn't have laughed. I would have sighed and said, "Yeah, that tracks." Because the truth is, nothing with Robert's family ever happened suddenly. The red flags didn't explode. They whispered. Slowly. Persistently. Until one day, you realize you've spent years pretending things were normal when they were anything but. When I first met Robert, he was 21, sweet in a quiet way, and had that earnest, slightly overwhelmed look of someone who tried very hard to be good at everything. I fell for him embarrassingly fast. Meeting his family felt like sitting at a table where everyone else had already chosen sides. His mother, Ruth, gave interrogation-level small talk. His father, Gerald, did the thing where every sentence started with, "Well, actually." And his younger sister, Jenna, was around 10 at the time, but already fluent in superiority. The very first dinner, Ruth leaned in and asked, "So, what exactly are your intentions with our Robert?" Our Robert. Like he was a family heirloom I was sneaking out of the display cabinet. She didn't stop there. She kept weaving in subtle jabs like a mosquito invisibly dive-bombing. "Oh, Robert is such a generous boy. I'm sure he paid for your meal. Girls your age can be expensive." Mind you, I had bought the groceries for that dinner, but when people are looking for a villain, they'll script the story themselves. Jenna, even as a middle schooler, took notes like an intern training for hostility. "Why do you let him buy you things?" she'd ask. "He bought me a $2 plastic keychain," I said once. "That adds up," she said, dead serious. Meanwhile, the actual financial foundation of the family was Robert. He'd put himself through community college with no help from Ruth and Gerald, then went straight into working full-time. And from the moment he got his first paycheck, his parents treated his income like it was part of their monthly budget. He called it helping. I called it mandatory tithing to the church of emotional guilt. Still, we got married. We were happy. We built our own routines, our own little world, and the bi-weekly dinners with his parents became something I tolerated the way you tolerate dentist cleanings. Necessary, mildly painful, survivable. Then we started trying for a baby. Trying turned into tracking. Tracking turned into timing. Timing turned into 2 years of nothing. And then came the doctor's office. The too quiet room. The pause before the results. The soft voice delivering a hard truth. Robert would never have biological children. Not low chance. Not maybe someday. 0. My husband held my hand, squeezed once, and whispered, "Okay." And he meant it. But that okay lived in the back of my ribs for months. We talked. For hours. Days. Weeks. It came down to 3 choices. Stay child-free. Adopt. Use a sperm donor. In the end, we chose the donor. Not because it was easy, nothing about it was, but because it gave us the chance to build the family we wanted without waiting years in an adoption system held together with paperwork and prayers. So we made the decision. Quietly. Privately. Then we made another. We wouldn't tell Robert's family, not because we were ashamed, but because we knew they would use it like ammunition, weaponize it, whisper about it, turn it into a hierarchy of real versus not real. And the idea of Ruth or Gerald looking at our child and seeing something less than was unbearable. Then our daughter Mia was born. And oh, she was perfect. She looked like me, a lot like me, which made sense, of course, but even then, Ruth couldn't help herself. She doesn't have any of Robert's features, she'd say, squinting. Funny that. Gerald once asked, half joking. Sure she's yours, Robbie. It took every molecule of self-control in Robert's body to stay calm, but the worst was Jenna, because she was old enough to know better and still chose cruelty. You guys spoil her, she'd say. Meanwhile, we bought her a bubble wand for $3. But in Jenna's mind, any dollar spent on Mia was a dollar stolen from her Royal College fund. And speaking of that, when Jenna graduated high school, she announced she was attending an expensive private university, not community college, not something modest, a school with a tuition bill that looked like a surgical procedure. Guess who she expected to pay? Not her parents. Nope. Robert. And he did. For 2 years, 2 full years, he paid her tuition. Not her housing, not her meals. She had to work part-time. But the tuition itself was massive. A generous, back-breaking gift. And what did Jenna say every time she visited? You're spending too much on your wife. You take too many vacations with Mia. If you didn't spoil your own family so much, maybe you could help your real family. Real family. Funny word now. Looking back, all the signs were there. All the resentment, all the entitlement, all the jealousy, and all the pressure to make sure their golden daughter got everything she wanted, even at the expense of ours. But nothing prepared me for the night when all those years of quiet poison finally erupted. And my 7-year-old learned the truth in the most brutal way possible. And that truth? That wasn't the end. That was just the beginning. If silence had a temperature, the drive home that night could have flash frozen a lake. Mia sat in the back seat, small and rigid, staring out the window like she was afraid the darkness might stare back. Robert gripped the steering wheel with both hands, knuckles white. I kept glancing at her through the mirror, waiting for a question, a tear, a breath. Anything. Nothing. Just a little girl holding her whole world together with 2 trembling hands. When we got home, she walked inside like she was sleepwalking. She didn't run to her toys, didn't take off her shoes, didn't ask for a snack. She just stood in the hallway, waiting for someone to tell her what reality was now. Robert and I exchanged a look, the kind that says, okay, this is where we stop being shocked and start being parents. We sat with her on the couch. I took her hand. Robert took the other. Mia, I said softly, remember how we've told you that we wanted you for a very long time? She nodded. Well, Robert said gently, when Mommy and I were trying to have a baby, the doctors told us my body couldn't make babies the regular way, so they helped us. Mia blinked, watching him like she was trying to understand a foreign language spoken underwater. You grew in Mommy's tummy, he continued. You were always wanted. You were always loved. And you are my daughter. Now and always. And Mommy never cheated, I added, because that poison needed to be neutralized immediately. Daddy has always known how you were made. He never had a second of doubt. She didn't cry. She didn't ask anything. She just nodded once, quietly slipped off the couch, and walked toward her room. The door clicked shut behind her. Robert rubbed his face. I don't know if that was acceptance or emotional shutdown. Both, I said. Welcome to childhood trauma speedruns. We gave her space. She needed it. We also needed a moment to breathe because the chaos wasn't over. It was just getting started. Robert walked into the office and sat down at his computer, his face set in a way that left no room for negotiation. Calm, steady, done. He opened the banking app. First click, cancel recurring transfer to Ruth and Gerald. Second click, cancel Jenna's tuition payment. Third click, shut down the extra debit card Jenna had been using. "Tara," he called from the office. "I'm cutting off everything. All of it." I walked to the doorway. "Good." He let out a short, shaky laugh. "Feels weirdly healthy." "Well," I said, "I'd bake you a congratulatory cake, but after tonight, I'm not sure either of us can emotionally handle cake." He leaned back in the chair, exhaling. "Honestly, this feels like the first decision I've made about them that actually makes sense." The next morning was quiet. Too quiet. Mia came out of her room holding a stuffed animal and asked if she could watch cartoons. No meltdown, no follow-up questions, just gentleness, fragility. I kept her close all day. Around noon, Robert's phone started ringing. Ruth and Gerald. He stared at the screen like it was something radioactive. "Tara," he said flatly. "They know about the tuition." He answered. The screaming started instantly. "How could you do this? Your sister needs this. You're ruining her future. We can't afford this without you. It's 2 days before the deadline." Robert held the phone an inch from his ear, expression blank. "I'm not paying anymore," he said calmly. "Robert, be reasonable," Gerald barked. "She can't study without your support." "She's 20, he replied. "She can take a loan, get a job, be an adult." Ruth practically shrieked. "You can't abandon family!" "You abandoned mine last night," he said. There was silence. Sharp. Ugly. Sizzling. Then the guilt-tripping began. "You're choosing her over us. You're brainwashed. You owe us. Your sister is counting on you." Robert hung up. Just hung up. No dramatic speech, no yelling, just a click. I walked over and kissed his cheek. "I'm proud of you." He looked startled. "I've never done that before," he admitted. "Hung up on them. Feels good though, right?" He let out a breath that sounded like he'd been holding it since childhood. "Yeah. Actually, yeah." Mia peeked around the corner. "Daddy? Are Grandma and Grandpa mad?" Robert crouched down to her level. "They're upset because they did something wrong," he said. "Not because of you." She nodded and went to her room without a word. Robert exhaled, leaning a shoulder against the wall like all the weight he'd been carrying finally slid into one place. We didn't even get 20 minutes before someone hammered at the door. Not frantic, not polite, just the kind of knock that says, "We're coming in one way or another." Robert's head lifted. "I'll get it," I said, already halfway there. I opened the door just a crack. Ruth and Gerald, faces tight, breathing hard. That self-righteous anger older people get when they feel they've been disrespected. "Let us in," Ruth said. Not a question. I stepped aside so the neighbors wouldn't have a front row seat. They walked in like the house belonged to them. Robert came into the hallway. His expression didn't change, but his whole posture did. "What are you doing here?" he asked. Gerald answered with, "You hung up on us." Robert didn't deny it. "Yes." Ruth's eyebrows shot up. "That's how you speak to your parents now?" "That's how I speak to anyone who crosses a line," he said. Ruth folded her arms. "We want an explanation. Immediately." Robert nodded once. "Fine. I canceled the tuition payments. I'm not paying anymore." Gerald blinked. "You what?" "You heard me." "You can't do that!" Ruth snapped. She needs that money. She's 20, Robert said. Plenty of adults figure it out. That's easy for you to say, Gerald said. You already had help when you were young. From who? Robert asked. Because it wasn't either of you. Ruth inhaled sharply. Don't be dramatic. We supported you in our own ways. You criticized Tara every chance you got, Robert said. You treated her like she was stealing from me when she was paying half our bills. You treated Mia like a guest. And now this. Ruth's lips thinned. Jenna made a mistake. I stepped closer. She told my daughter she wasn't family. She didn't mean it, Ruth insisted. She spoke without thinking. And you backed her, Robert said. Gerald shook his head. You're overreacting. You're letting emotions cloud your judgment. Emotions? Robert echoed. My daughter cried herself to sleep because of what you said. Ruth stiffened. We didn't say anything cruel. We simply told the truth. You told a 7-year-old that she wasn't really part of her family, I said. You think that's not cruel? Gerald took a step forward. Well, maybe if you hadn't lied about... Stop. Robert's voice turned low. Say what you want to say. Gerald swallowed, then said it plainly. You should have told us. Ruth added, We had a right to know that she isn't our granddaughter. Biologically. My breath stuck in my throat. That was the sentence that cracked the house open. Because behind us, at the edge of the hallway, a small voice whispered, Daddy? Mia stood there, bare feet, wet hair, face pale. Her eyes flicked between all of us. They said, I'm not their granddaughter. Her voice broke on the last word. I didn't even think. I went to her, lifting her before her knees gave out. She clung to my shirt and started to cry, quiet, shuddering sobs that made her whole body shake. Ruth took a step toward her. Sweetheart, you misunderstood. We didn't mean... Don't, Robert said. His tone was level, not raised, but final. He walked toward us, putting a protective hand on Mia's back while she shook against me. Then he turned to his parents. You need to leave. Ruth blinked. Robert, listen. I'm done listening. Gerald's voice tightened. We came here to fix this. No, Robert said. You came here to justify yourselves. Ruth frowned. This is not how a son speaks to his parents. Robert didn't move. This is how a father protects his child. The sentence hung in the air like a closing door. Ruth's eyes flashed with insult. You would throw away your own family over a misunderstanding? You are the ones who threw us away, Robert said. The moment you made Mia believe she didn't belong. Gerald shook his head, stunned that he was losing control of the narrative. If we walk out that door, you won't be coming back, Robert finished. He opened the front door, holding it with steady hands. Please go. Ruth stared at him for a long few seconds, disbelief written across her face. But Robert didn't look away. Eventually, she stepped past him. Gerald followed. They walked to the car without another word. Robert shut the door, locked it, checked it twice. When he turned around, the anger in him was gone, replaced with something quieter and far heavier. He took Mia gently from my arms and held her against him, her small fists still gripping his shirt. It's okay, he whispered. You're okay. She cried until her breath slowed, until the tension melted out of her little body, until the only sound in the house was her soft sniffing. Robert didn't let go. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. Some choices explained themselves. Later, after she finally fell asleep, we stood in the doorway watching her breathe. Robert took my hand. This isn't the end of it, he murmured. You know that. I nodded. It wasn't. The week that followed was quieter than I expected. Not peaceful, just normal in a way we hadn't felt in years. Mia didn't ask about Ruth or Gerald again. She didn't bring up what she overheard. She didn't cry at bedtime. She just slowly returned to herself. One night while we made dinner, she asked very seriously, "Do we still have to go to Grandma Ruth's Sunday lunches?" Robert froze with the spatula midair. I held my breath. Then she added, "Because I don't want to pretend to like her meatloaf anymore. It tastes like old socks." I choked on my drink. Robert actually laughed. A small, tired laugh, but real. "No," he told her. "No more Sunday lunches." "Good," she said, already moving on. "Can we have tacos instead?" Just like that, a weight shifted. In the evenings, she colored at the dining table while Robert caught up on work, and I finished my own tasks. Sometimes she'd wander over, lean against him, and ask what he was typing with that tiny, suspicious frown kids get. Sometimes she'd crawl into my lap and show me drawings of our little family, just the three of us, standing under a crooked sun. She didn't draw Ruth and Gerald in any of them, and I didn't ask why. A quiet week passed. Not peaceful, just steady, like we were all learning to breathe again. Then, on Saturday morning, just as Robert and I were getting Mia's shoes on for a library trip, there was a knock at the door, not loud, not aggressive, just a soft, hesitant knock. Robert and I looked at each other. We both knew exactly who it was before we even opened the door. Jenna. Standing alone on the porch, holding a small box wrapped in bakery twine. Her eyes were red, her shoulders round, and for the first time in her life, she looked unsure of her place in the world. "Tara," she said, voice thin. "Can I talk to you both?" Robert stepped beside me. His jaw tightened automatically. He was polite, but only in the way you're polite to a stranger holding a suspicious package. Jenna swallowed hard. "I came to apologize." She held out the cake like an offering to the gods. Her hands were shaking. "I really didn't know," she said. "If I had known the truth, I would never have said those things, and not in front of Mia. That was horrible. I'm so sorry." Her voice cracked on sorry, and for a moment I saw the frightened teenager underneath all the entitlement. Robert nodded once. Nothing warm, nothing soft. Just acknowledgement. "We accept your apology," he said. Jenna looked relieved, then panicked, then relieved again. She glanced behind us. "Is Mia here? I want to say it to her too." "No," I said. "And she doesn't need any more confusion right now." Jenna nodded quickly. "Right. Of course, that makes sense." A long silence stretched out. The kind people fill with fake small talk. But Jenna didn't reach for small talk. She reached for the real reason she came. "I also wanted to ask," she began, eyes darting everywhere except at us, "if you could still pay my tuition." There it was. Robert didn't react. Not even a blink. Jenna kept going, words spilling out like she was trying to outrun her own desperation. "I can't afford it. Not even close. And if I don't pay, they'll drop me from the semester. I don't know what to do." She took a shaky breath. "Could you maybe just loan it to me? I swear I'll pay it back when I graduate, or when I get a job, or—" "No," Robert said. The word landed like a hammer. Jenna blinked, stunned. "No?" "No," he repeated. "I'm not paying anymore." She swallowed hard. "Okay, I get it. After everything that happened, it's complicated. But maybe just this semester? Just to get me through the transition." "No!" Her face twisted. "Please," she whispered. "I can't drop out. You don't understand. No one else can help me." I understand perfectly, Robert said. You're an adult. Adults figure things out. She looked like she'd been slapped. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, she said quietly. I didn't know. That's the problem, Robert cut in. You didn't know. You didn't ask. You didn't care how it would affect a 7-year-old hearing those words. Jenna's mouth trembled. Tears burned at the edges of her eyes. I said I was sorry, she whispered. And we accepted your apology, I said. But an apology isn't a coupon. She winced. I can't believe you'd let me fail, she said softly. After everything. After everything, Robert repeated. After everything I paid? After the years of helping? After everything my daughter went through? Yes. After everything. Another tear slipped down her cheek. Is there anything I can do? She whispered. No, Robert said. Her shoulders collapsed inward. She looked, for the first time in her life, small. Really small. She turned to leave. Hand on the doorknob, she paused and said almost inaudibly, I never thought you'd choose her over us. Robert stared at her like she'd spoken Martian. She's my daughter, he said. There was never a choice. Jenna nodded once, sharp, defeated, and walked into the cold. Robert closed the door, locked it, then leaned against it, letting out a long, exhausted breath. I walked over and pressed my forehead against his. We did the right thing, I said. He nodded, eyes closed. I know. I just didn't expect it to feel like this. Like what? Like I finally grew up. 6 months later, life is simple in a way it hasn't been in years. We've stayed no contact. No more shouting matches, no guilt trips, no sudden demands for money. Just calm. Robert's paycheck stays with us now. Every dollar. And Mia? She's happier than I've ever seen her. Light. Confident. Completely unbothered by the people who once made her feel small. Meanwhile, word gets around. Ruth and Gerald had to take out emergency loans after Jenna missed the chance to apply for student loans. Then another loan when that wasn't enough. They even refinanced their house to cover her tuition. Now they're buried in debt, and Jenna is exhausted working extra hours just to keep up. The same people who treated us like we owed them the world, they're the ones sinking. And us? We're finally free. So what do you think? Did Robert go too far or not far enough? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more. At a dentist appointment, my 10-year-old daughter looked frightened. Then her dentist handed me a secret note that my husband wasn't supposed to see. I read it and froze. I didn't panic. I took action. By the next night, my husband was the one panicking. We lived in Emerald Valley, a gated community outside Chicago where the lawns are trimmed like military haircuts, and everyone's smiles come with an invisible HOA invoice. If you forget to wave at your neighbor, someone will politely remind you. If you forget to keep your family looking flawless, people don't remind you. They just watch. I'm Catherine Reynolds, Kate, to everyone who's ever met me for more than 5 minutes. I'm a physician at a private clinic downtown. I've treated heart attacks, broken bones, panic attacks, and one man who insisted his energy was off because Mercury was doing whatever Mercury does. My husband is Michael, Mike. He's the kind of man who can make a spreadsheet feel judged. He works in finance. He believes in performance metrics the way some people believe in God, deeply, loudly, and with very little room for questioning. And our daughter is Ellie, technically Eleanor on paper, because Mike liked classic names. Ellie has my last name, Reynolds. Mike kept his Hayes. At the time, we called it a modern choice. In practice, it mostly meant we didn't have to argue about monograms. Ellie was bright, curious, and once, she laughed like she wasn't afraid of taking up space. Once. I used to tell myself we were lucky. I used to tell myself I had married a good man. Neighbors told me too. At block parties, while the dads compared grills like they were discussing geopolitical strategy, someone would lean in and say, "Kate, you hit the jackpot. Mike is so involved." Involved. That word sounds warm until you realize it can also mean embedded, like shrapnel. And I would smile, because in Emerald Valley, smiling is part of the lease. The truth is, Mike ran our home the way he ran his department. Goals, deadlines, deliverables. Ellie had a color-coded schedule taped inside a kitchen cabinet. You couldn't see it unless you reached for the cereal, because we weren't advertising it. We were just living it. Monday, math drills, piano, reading log. Tuesday, tutoring, writing practice, character building chores. Wednesday, test prep, screen time earned, early bedtime. Even weekends weren't weekends. Weekends were catch-up and extra push. Mike called it discipline. He said it like it was a gift. I called it structure. I said it like I was a responsible mother. Ellie called it nothing at all. Ellie just did what she was told. The first time I noticed something was wrong, I brushed it off because I was tired and it was easier. Ellie used to talk. She used to ramble about books and weird facts and how clouds looked like animals. She used to ask me questions while I cooked. "Mom, why do people yawn?" "Mom, do fish sleep?" Then one day she stopped asking. Not gradually, just stopped. She also stopped leaving things around the house. No socks on the floor, no half-finished crafts, no stuffed animals wandering into the living room. A 10-year-old without mess is not a well-raised child. It's a child who's scared of consequences. I didn't say that out loud. I thought, she's maturing. Because that was the story that hurt the least. A few weeks before the toothache, her teacher, Jessica Miller, called me after school. "Mrs. Reynolds," she said gently, "Ellie's quieter lately. She sits alone at recess. She's not mean. She's not disruptive. She's just withdrawn." "I'm sure it's just a busy season," I said, the way moms say things when they're trying to keep their world from wobbling. "We're prepping for a competition." "I understand," Jessica said. Then, after a pause, "She also seems terrified of making mistakes. She'll erase a word until there's a hole in the paper." I promised I'd talk to Ellie. I did mention it to Mike at dinner. We were eating grilled chicken and vegetables because Mike believed joy was stored in carbs and should be rationed. "Jessica called," I said. "She thinks Ellie's stressed." Mike didn't even look up from his plate. "Good," he said, like stress was a vitamin. "Good? If she cares, she'll excel," he said. "If she's relaxed, she'll coast. The world doesn't reward coasting." Ellie sat very still. She chewed like she was trying not to make noise. I tried again. "She's only 10. Mike finally looked up. His face was calm, his voice even, the kind of calm that makes you feel childish for having feelings. "And she's capable," he said. "We're not raising average." "We." It sounded like teamwork. It sounded like love, and I nodded, because I was exhausted and because I wanted to believe him. Another week passed. Emma's mom texted me, "Sleep over this weekend? The girls miss each other." I smiled at my phone. Finally, something normal. "Absolutely," I texted back. Then I heard Mike behind me. "Who's that?" he asked casually, as if he didn't already know. He tracked our calendar like it was a stock portfolio. "Emma's mom," I said. "She wants Ellie to sleep over Saturday." Mike's eyebrows lifted, just slightly. Not anger, not even disapproval. Just decision. "She has practice tests Saturday," he said. "She can see Emma after the competition." It would have taken so little to push back. A simple, "She needs friends." A simple, "No." Instead, I heard myself type, "Sorry, busy weekend. Rain check?" Ellie didn't even ask why. She just nodded when I told her, like she already knew how the world worked. That should have gutted me. It didn't. Not yet. Monday morning, Ellie came into the kitchen with her hand pressed to her cheek. "Does it hurt?" I asked. "A little," she said. Her "a little" was the kind kids learn when they don't want to be trouble. It was small and careful, like she was trying to shrink the pain down to something acceptable. I called Dentlux Dental, the clinic everyone in Emerald Valley recommended. In our neighborhood, recommendations were less about quality and more about who you were seen with. They had an opening at 11. I planned to take her alone. I'm a doctor. I can handle a dentist visit. I can handle a lot. Mike appeared in the doorway as I was grabbing my keys. "I'm coming," he said. "You have a meeting," I reminded him. "I'll move it," he said, like meetings were chess pieces. "I want to be there." It almost sounded sweet. Almost. Ellie's eyes flicked to him, and then away so fast it was like she'd touched a hot stove. "You want Dad to come?" I asked gently, because the look on her face wasn't relief. Ellie's head shook too quickly. "Yes, of course." Her voice was bright in that forced way kids do when they're trying to stay safe. Like cheerfulness is armor. In the car, Mike talked about staying ahead, about how missing schoolwork over a little tooth pain wasn't an option. "You can do half the math set tonight," he told Ellie, "but I want it perfect." Ellie stared out the window and whispered, "Okay." When we got to Dentlux, the waiting room was full of the usual kid-friendly nonsense. Cartoons without sound, a fish tank, a basket of toys that had clearly been disinfected into emotional emptiness. There was a little boy building a tower of blocks. He knocked it over on purpose and laughed. Ellie didn't react. She sat with her hands folded on her lap like she was waiting for a verdict. The receptionist called, "Eleanor Reynolds?" Ellie stood up so abruptly her chair squeaked. I put a hand on her shoulder. She felt tense, like a wire pulled too tight. The dentist was Dr. Brian Sullivan, mid-50s, kind eyes, the calm confidence of someone who's seen every kind of fear and doesn't mock any of it. "Hi, Ellie," he said. "Show me where it hurts." "Back," she whispered. "Okay. We'll go slow," he said. "Mom's right here. Dad, too." And then his eyes landed on Mike. It was subtle. So subtle I might have missed it if I weren't trained to read faces in exam rooms. Something in Dr. Sullivan's expression shifted. Not hostility. Not fear. More like recognition. Like he'd seen this dynamic before. Mike smiled his corporate smile. Polite. Blank. Dr. Sullivan started the exam. Ellie's whole body went rigid under the bright light. She didn't flinch at the mirror. She didn't flinch at the probe. She flinched when Mike cleared his throat. That was the moment my stomach sank, quietly, like an elevator cable snapping. Dr. Sullivan took longer than expected. He glanced at Ellie's jaw, the inside of her cheeks, her gums. He pressed gently along her muscles. Mike finally spoke. "Is there an infection?" "No obvious cavity," Dr. Sullivan said, careful and controlled. "But I'm seeing signs of bruxism." Mike blinked. "Bruxism?" "Grinding," the doctor said. "Often stress-related. It can cause tooth pain, jaw pain, headaches." Mike let out a small laugh like the doctor had suggested essential oils. "Stress," Mike repeated. "She's 10. Dr. Sullivan didn't smile back. 10-year-olds get stressed, sometimes more than adults. Their bodies just don't have the language yet. Ellie's fingers clenched in her lap. Dr. Sullivan's voice stayed calm. "I'm also seeing repeated small injuries inside her mouth, biting, tension. This isn't a one-week thing." Mike's jaw tightened. We have high standards. That's not stress. That's motivation. The doctor looked at him in a way that made the room feel colder. Motivation isn't supposed to hurt, he said. After the exam, we headed to the front. Mike muttered, "We're not coming back here. The guy's got an attitude." Ellie walked between us like she was trying not to touch either wall. We were almost out when Dr. Sullivan came into the hallway. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said, then saw Mike and hesitated. He forced a polite smile, as if this was a normal follow-up. "Call if you have any questions," he said loudly. Then he shook my hand and in the same motion slipped a folded card into my palm. His fingers tightened for a fraction of a second. A warning. In the car, Mike was ranting. "He acted like I'm the problem, like I'm abusing my kid because I expect excellence." Ellie didn't make a sound. At home, Mike said he had to run back to the office and left. And only then did I unfold the card. "I'm concerned about your daughter. Call me when you're alone. There are things we need to discuss. Dr. Sullivan." I stared at it like it was written in a language I couldn't read and yet understood perfectly. I dialed 911. My thumb hovered, and then my brain did what it does best when it wants to avoid pain. It made excuses. What am I going to say? My dentist gave me a note? My husband is strict? My kid is quiet? I hung up. Because illusions are comforting, until they become coffins. The rest of the day, I moved like a machine. At work, I smiled at patients, signed charts, nodded at colleagues. My hands did their job while my mind replayed Ellie's rigid shoulders under that dental light. A nurse on my team glanced at me. "Kate, you okay? You look pale." "I didn't sleep," I lied, because that's the kind of lie adults accept without questions. That evening, Mike greeted me with the bright, satisfied tone of a man who believes he's doing everything right. "Ellie's fine," he said. "I gave her ibuprofen. She finished her reading log. No complaints." Ellie said, "Hi, Mom," like she was reciting a line. I hugged her. Her body didn't soften into me. She stayed braced, like contact came with conditions. After dinner, Mike had Ellie at the table with worksheets. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't hitting. He wasn't even being mean in a way that would look bad in public. He was worse. He was calm. "Again," he said, pointing at a wrong answer. "You rushed. You didn't think." Ellie erased. Her eraser left gray smudges on the page and her fingers. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Mike didn't react to the apology. He just watched her like she was an investment he didn't trust. I stood in the doorway and felt something shift in me. Not certainty, not courage, just nausea. The next morning, the second Mike left for work, I called Dent Lux. Dr. Sullivan answered like he'd been waiting for my number. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said. "Thank you. Can you come in today? Alone." 2 hours later, I was sitting in a small office instead of a dental chair. Dr. Sullivan didn't waste time. "I want to be clear," he said. "I'm not trying to destroy your family. I'm trying to protect a child." My throat tightened. "You think Mike is hurting her?" He chose his words like he was walking through a minefield. "I saw a child who froze when her father spoke," he said. "Not normal nervousness, not dentist fear. She was afraid of being observed, afraid of doing something wrong." I started to defend Mike, because apparently my mouth had muscle memory for denial. "He's strict," I said. "He wants the best for her. Strict is not the same as terrifying," Dr. Sullivan cut in, still calm. "I also saw repeated tissue damage inside her mouth, consistent with chronic anxiety and jaw clenching. And her weight, she's on the thin side in a way that can reflect stress or withholding." "Withholding?" My voice cracked. "Food is a common control tool. he said gently. So is isolation. So is humiliation. I felt heat rise in my face. He would never hit her. Dr. Sullivan nodded like he'd heard that exact sentence 1,000 times. Physical violence isn't the only kind of harm, he said. Fear can shape a child's brain just as powerfully. Then he leaned forward. I am a mandated reporter, he said. I had reasonable suspicion. I filed a report with Child Protective Services. The words landed like a gavel. I didn't call, I whispered. Many parents don't, he said. Not accusing, just factual. That's why mandated reporting exists. I'm also giving you resources. You need a safety plan. If you think your home could become unsafe when your husband realizes what's happening, do not confront him alone. He slid a paper across the desk. CPS hotline information, a local child advocacy center, a crisis line, and a short list of child therapists. I stared at it, suddenly very aware that my medical degree had not prepared me for my own kitchen table. You're telling me my daughter is being abused, I said, and the word tasted unreal. I'm telling you, your daughter is afraid, he said quietly. And fear like that doesn't come from nowhere. I left the clinic in a fog, the kind of fog where everything looks normal from the outside, cars, traffic lights, people buying coffee, and you're the only one walking around with your world split open. That afternoon, Mike texted, "Running late. Board call." And for the first time in years, I was grateful for his absence. I made Ellie dinner. Not the clean dinner Mike liked. Not the lean protein with steamed vegetables and the moral superiority on the side. I made pancakes. Real ones. Butter, syrup. The kind that makes the kitchen smell like a childhood you can actually remember. Ellie sat at the table and stared at the plate like it might be a test. You can eat, I said softly. She picked up her fork, hesitated, then looked at me. Is Dad okay with this? My heart clenched so hard it felt like it had teeth. Dad's not here, I said. And you're not in trouble. Ever. Not with me. She blinked rapidly, like she was trying not to cry. We ate in near silence until I couldn't stand it. Ellie, I said carefully, I need to ask you something, and you won't get in trouble for the answer. I promise. Her shoulders lifted, tight. Are you scared of Dad? She froze. Then, automatically, no. Too quick. Too polished. I waited. Didn't push. Didn't argue. Just sat there like a safe place and hoped she'd risk stepping into it. Her lower lip trembled. Ellie, I whispered. Please. I can't help if I don't know. The tears came fast and silent. She said. I'm scared. I reached across the table and held her hands. They were cold. What does he do? I asked, and my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. Ellie swallowed hard. When I get a B, she said, he says I'm embarrassing him. He says, do you want to be average? Is that what you want? And if I cry, he says crying is for babies. My throat burned. He makes me redo things, she continued, words spilling now, like once the door opened it couldn't close. Over and over. And he times me. And if I'm too slow, he says I'm lazy. I squeezed her hands. Ellie. Sometimes he makes me sit in my room, she said. Like, for hours. No books. No toys. Just sit and think about what I did wrong. My stomach twisted. And sometimes, she whispered, eyes dropping, I don't get dinner. He says if I don't earn it, I don't get it. I felt something inside me go numb. Did he ever... I couldn't even finish the sentence. Ellie shook her head. He doesn't hit. He just looks at me. and I feel like I'm going to disappear. Then she said the line that broke what was left of my denial. He told me it's our secret, she whispered. He said if I tell you, you'll pick him anyway, because he's right. She started sobbing then, real sobs, the kind kids hold back until the pressure becomes unbearable. I didn't want you to be mad, she cried. I didn't want him to be mad. I just wanted to do it right. I pulled her into my arms, and she clung to me like she'd been drowning. You never have to earn food, I said into her hair. You never have to earn love. You never have to be perfect to be safe. She cried harder, like safety was a foreign language and she was trying to learn it all at once. I called Mom. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. When she picked up, I didn't dress it up. I didn't soften it. I didn't protect anyone's reputation. Mom, I said, we're leaving. Tonight. There was a pause. Then her voice changed. Steady. Sharp. Immediate. Pack documents, she said. Birth certificate, insurance cards, your essentials. I'm on my way. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't argue with help. I packed like I was in triage. Not everything, just what mattered. Ellie's school laptop, her favorite hoodie, her stuffed animal she claimed she didn't care about, my work ID, our important papers, a few changes of clothes. Ellie hovered in the hallway, watching me like she expected Mike to materialize out of a wall. Is Dad going to be mad? She whispered. Yes, I said honestly. But that's not your job to fix. We left before Mike got home. I wrote a note, short, clear, no drama, because drama was what Mike fed on. I know. Ellie and I are safe. Do not contact her directly. My attorney will be in touch. America doesn't do family implosions with teary living room speeches. America does it with paperwork and restraining order templates. Mike's parents, Richard and Patricia Hayes, called the next morning. Of course they did. Patricia didn't ask if Ellie was okay. She asked what I thought I was doing. You're overreacting, she snapped. Mike is a dedicated father. He pushes because he cares. I stared at my phone and thought about how people can say cares and mean controls. Patricia, I said, Ellie was scared to eat pancakes. A beat of silence. Then Patricia scoffed. That's ridiculous! Richard came on the line with his quieter, sharper voice. Kate, he said, you understand what you're doing to Mike's reputation. There it was. The sacred object. Not the child. The reputation. He did this, I said. Not me. They hung up on me like I was the problem. Mike called, texted, left voicemails that swung wildly between charming and threatening. Kate, you're misunderstanding everything. You're poisoning her against me. You're making a huge mistake. I love you both. Come home. Each message was delivered in his calm voice, as if calmness made it true. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not yet. All I could do was sit beside Ellie at my parents' house and watch her sleep without flinching in her dreams. That alone felt like proof. 2 days later, CPS contacted me. A caseworker came with a clipboard and the steady tone of someone who has heard every version of, but he's a good man. She asked practical questions. Any weapons in the home? Any history of physical harm? Does Ellie have a safe adult at school? Has Ellie ever been left without food? Does Mike monitor her communications? Ellie answered quietly. She didn't embellish. She didn't dramatize. She said it like she was reporting weather. Yes. Sometimes. I wasn't allowed to tell. The caseworker nodded and wrote it down, and I hated how normal it looked on paper. Because on paper, my daughter's fear was just ink. Then came court. Temporary orders, emergency custody, a hearing date that arrived faster than my brain could process. Mike showed up in a suit that probably cost more than my first car. He looked composed, concerned, devastated in a way that would photograph well. He told the judge he was a highly involved parent and that I was overwhelmed by my workload and confused strictness with abuse. He said he was open to family counseling, as if this was a miscommunication. The judge listened, expressionless, because judges don't get paid to be shocked. My attorney spoke. CPS had filed their report. The CPS report sat there in black and white, colder than anything Mike said. The judge granted me primary physical custody, temporary at first, until the investigation concluded, and ordered supervised visitation for Mike. Mike's face didn't crack, but his eyes did something I recognized from home. That look that said, "You will pay for humiliating me." I felt cold all the way down my arms, and I thought, this is why Dr. Sullivan told me not to confront him alone. We started therapy with Allison Grant the next week. Allison was calm, kind, and absolutely unshakable. She didn't get dazzled by Mike's involved dad routine. She didn't get thrown by my guilt. She didn't treat Ellie like a fragile doll either. She treated her like a child who deserved her own space in the world. "No contact outside the supervised schedule," Allison told me. "No phone calls alone. No surprise visits. Ellie needs predictability." The first supervised visit was in a neutral center that smelled like disinfectant and old crayons. There was a small room with a couch, a few toys, and a camera in the corner. Not subtle. Nothing about it was subtle. Mike walked in and smiled like this was a normal dad-daughter outing. "Hey, kiddo," he said, reaching for Ellie. Ellie stepped back. The supervisor, a woman with a calm voice and a clipboard, said gently, "Let Ellie choose physical contact." Mike's smile tightened for a fraction of a second. Then he nodded. "Of course," he said. Because of course he did. He tried to talk like nothing happened. "How's school? What are you reading? Have you been keeping up with math?" Ellie answered in one-word replies. Then Mike did what Mike always did. He drifted toward correction. "You should sit up straighter," he said casually. The supervisor cleared her throat. Mike blinked. "What?" "This is a visitation, not a coaching session," she said, still polite. Mike's jaw flexed. Ellie's eyes dropped to her shoes. I watched from the observation area, hands clenched, heart pounding, because even now, in a monitored room, his instinct was control. After the visit, Ellie climbed into my car and exhaled like she'd been holding her breath the entire hour. "You did so good," I told her. She stared out the window. "Did I do it right?" I swallowed hard. "There is no right. You just are." That concept took months for her to believe. We moved into a small apartment back in Chicago once the temporary orders stabilized. It wasn't Emerald Valley. There was no gate, no manicured lawn, no neighbors who smiled like surveillance cameras. And somehow, it felt like the first place we'd actually lived. Ellie switched to a public school. She started slow. She apologized constantly. Sorry for asking. Sorry for laughing. Sorry for being hungry. One evening, she spilled juice on the kitchen floor. She froze. Her face went white. Her hands trembled. I saw her brace for the familiar, the sigh, the lecture, the punishment. I grabbed paper towels. "It's okay," I said. She blinked. "That's it?" "That's it." And then she burst into tears, not because of the juice, but because the world didn't collapse. That was the day I finally understood what fear does. It makes tiny accidents feel like life or death events. Mike's parents tried again, a few months later. Patricia showed up at my building unannounced. "I just want to see my granddaughter," she said, eyes narrowed like I was withholding property. "You can coordinate through the attorneys," I said. Patricia's mouth pinched. "You've turned this into a war." "No," I said. Mike did. I'm just refusing to surrender Ellie. She looked at me like I was the unreasonable one. People love calling boundaries war when they're used to crossing them freely. The divorce took months. Court dates, evaluations, parenting classes, therapy compliance. Mike attended everything. On time. In polished shoes. Because Mike never missed an obligation that could be used as evidence of his excellence. But excellence isn't the same as empathy. Little by little, Ellie changed. Not all at once. Not in a movie montage way. In small, almost invisible ways. She started leaving a book on the couch without panicking. She started laughing louder. She started asking for seconds at dinner without permission. She started saying, "I don't know," without flinching. Allison called it reclaiming space. I called it breathing. 2 years after that dentist visit, on another supervised session, Mike finally said something different. Not a defense, not a justification, not a complaint about how hard he tried. He sat across from Ellie, hands open on his knees, like he was trying to show he wasn't holding a weapon. "Ellie," he said quietly, "I was wrong." Ellie stared at him, cautious. "I thought pressure would make you strong," he said. "It didn't. It made you scared. I'm sorry." His voice shook just slightly, enough to sound human. Ellie's hands stayed in her lap, but her shoulders didn't rise to her ears the way they used to. "I didn't want to make you mad," she said. Mike's eyes filled. "It wasn't your job to manage my feelings." That sentence, simple, obvious, devastating, was one of the first truly healthy things I'd ever heard him say. Ellie swallowed. I don't feel scared right now." Mike nodded, slow. "Good. That's what I want." It wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't forgiveness wrapped in a bow. It wasn't a family magically repaired. It was something rarer. A real beginning. And I learned something I wish I could teach in medical school, right between anatomy and pharmacology. Love doesn't require fear. Fear is not discipline. Fear is not high standards. Fear is not character building. And when a child gets quieter, it isn't always maturity. Sometimes it's a smoke alarm with the volume turned down, because someone taught them that even sounding the alarm is wrong. Thanks for watching. If this story resonated with you, please give the video a like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. And I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below. What stood out to you, and what would you have done in her place? See you next time.